Marta Holovka is nailing dead air into a wall, and the men of Broken Creek, Montana are watching her like she's gone soft. It is October of 1903, and the woman is 41 years old, wide-shouldered from 10 years of homestead labor and splitting cordwood. She stands inside the skeleton of a new cabin she has been building since July alone without a husband or helpful neighbor. She is nailing boards to the inside face of her outer wall, leaving a 4-inch gap between the two. Trapping dead air, her neighbor Dunk Ferris leans against the fence post, arms crossed against the October chill, watching her. With open mockery, Marta, I seen a lot of fool things, but building 2 walls where one oughta do takes the cake. She doesn't look up, her hammer strikes true, and the nail sinks flush as she reaches for another board. Anders Lund, the dry goods owner, joins Dunk, squinting at the strange double layer of boards and shaking his head. That Ukrainian woman is throwing good lumber after bad. Anders says loudly, "A wall inside a wall." What next? The laughter of the men carries across the frozen grass. Marta hears every mocking word, but her heavy hammer falls again, rhythmic and steady. She has a secret that neither the skeptical neighbors nor any of the 12 families along Broken Creek understand about survival and heat. She learned it from her grandfather near Poltava, where winters are mean and heat is held like a general holds a battlefield. You don't fight the cold, you trap the warmth by building a wall, then another behind it, leaving the cold nowhere to go. She has $11.40 left. The bank holds a note for $320 on this land. She has until spring to prove the place, or Mr. Hollowell will arrive with his polite voice and bank papers. Her husband Bowden died 14 months ago, not in a storm or fire, but in their old drafty cabin in January of 1902. The temperature hit 4 to 7 below zero for 11 days, and the stove couldn't keep up. Bowden had a weakness in his chest that the cold found like a key finds a lock. He was gone by February. She buried him in ground so frozen, took 2 days to dig deep. The old cabin is why she is building the new one, single layer pine boards and tar paper. Nothing else against the sky in a mild winter, merely cold in a hard winter, a killing room. She isn't building a house, she's building a survival instrument before she drives another nail. She must understand her enemy, not the cold itself. Cold is merely the absence of heat. She fights the relentless movement of warmth. From where it exists, heat moves in 3 ways. Everyone tries to rob her. Conduction travels through solid wood and floorboards like water. Convection circulates air. Bleeding heat with every revolution. Radiation passes silently through open air like the sun's warmth. Every cabin on Broken Creek is losing heat by all 3 methods simultaneously, all night, every night, all winter. The question is not whether your walls can stop this. They cannot. The question is how slowly they allow it to happen. What Marta's grandfather knew is that still dead air resists the flow of heat like solid pine. Her 4-inch air gap is doing the work of 12 inches of solid timber. The catch is the word dead. Moving air carries heat away with devastating efficiency, but sealed air locked in a cavity becomes a nearly invisible wall that the cold cannot easily cross. This is the secret. Not new technology, not expensive material physics, so old it has no inventor. Her grandfather scratched the mathematics in his Bible, and she carried it across an ocean in her pocket. The men of Broken Creek are standing at her fence, laughing at what they do not understand. Her hammer falls again, rhythmic and certain. As she builds her fortress against the coming freeze, the outer wall goes up first. Back in the heat of July, rough sawn pine boards vertical with horizontal blocking between the studs. She tamps oakum into the cracks between boards like a boat. She wraps the outside in double tar paper, overlapping like shingles tacked with 6 to 3 cent copper nails. She can't really spare that outer wall. Will be cold on a cold day. Cold moves through paper and boards, looking for next place it will find 4 inches of dead air. The inner wall she builds in October, sealed and plumb. She nails ledger boards to the inner face of studs. She sets flat shale creek slabs at base and top, sealing the cavity so no air enters or escapes. Above a sealed chamber, a lung that doesn't breathe cold reaches the wall, crosses the gap, meeting the inner. Then she builds the inner wall itself, mixing a lime plaster from quicklime. She slakes herself in a barrel, adding horsehair for tensile strength and river sand for body. She creates a thick, resilient mixture. She trowels it hot onto the inner face of the inner wall. Boards working with rhythmic, steady precision. 2 coats of plaster, letting the first cure before she applies the second, creating a dense shield. The plaster is thermal mass, absorbing heat from the stove and releasing it through the long night. It stores warmth away. A stone pulled from a fire stays warm long after flames fade. The stove only needs to run long enough to charge the walls. The walls do the rest. Dunk Ferris and his wife watch from the fence as Marta trowels plaster in the dimming light. She's plastering the inside of a wall. Mrs. Ferris says, her mouth making small disapproving movements that she says. Dunk and October, they both shake their heads at the Ukrainian woman's folly. She'll freeze before it cures, Mrs. Ferris predicts, as the cold October wind begins to howl. Marta hears them, but her trowel draws a long arc across the wet plaster without pause or answer. The plaster smells of minerals, and effort. Her arms ache from the shoulder forward with every heavy sweep. She has worked from before dawn until the dark takes the light, and by the moon on bright nights savings are nearly gone. $40 spent on lumber, quicklime, and the basics of building a fortress. 80 cents for horsehair, more for copper nails and saw blades that snapped in the summer heat. $11.40. The precise weight of her remaining hope as winter approaches. The banknote is due. In April, the entire architecture of a life balanced on $300. The Homestead Act promised land, but the Montana winter, and the bank offered a different conversation. Mr. Hollowell arrives with a polite voice and a leather satchel that can end everything. His bank required proof of viable improvement, a structure that would stand a dead husband, an unfinished cabin, and $11. Weren't proof. Come April, Hollowell needed to see something that worked. Every board and nail is a sentence in her argument. She doesn't let herself think about April. Hallie Dempster comes down the road with pickled beets. You want help with anything? Know how to mix lime? No, says Hallie. But I can learn. Hallie is in the cabin learning the ratio of plaster. Pete leans in the doorway, then holds a board for Marta. By moonrise, Pete helped hang boards, and Hallie plastered. They don't say much. The work says what needs saying. By late October, the outer shell is finished. Vertical pine, a 4-inch gap sealed with shale runs the full perimeter. Inside, she has raised a shell of planed pine boards. 2 coats of horsehair lime plaster cover every inner inch. The ceiling is built with the same double wall air gap. A floor of packed clay sits over 8 inches. Gravel centered in the room is a small cast iron box stove. She cleaned and reseated all joints with furnace cement. The stovepipe rises through a clay-packed collar in the ceiling. The stove is not large. It doesn't need to be. The cabin is small. 14 feet by 16 feet. Double walls eat 8 inches on every side. It is smaller than any standard clay cabin. Dunk Ferris nearly falls off his fence post. Laughing woman built herself a coffin. Dunk tells his wife that night. A well-insulated coffin. November arrives with a gray warning. The second week it hits 18 below on Marta's thermometer. Dunk Ferris's cabin drops to 41 degrees inside before his stove even gets hot. Dunk burns through a full cord of wood in just 5 days to keep warm. Marta's cabin holds at 52 degrees with a fire fed every 4 hours. She writes it in her notebook. Outside temperature, inside temperature. Would burn. She borrows Hallie Dempster's thermometer to compare both. Agree. 18 below 52, above a difference of 70 degrees, cross 8 inches of double wall dead air. And plaster. Her grandfather's charcoal math was right. December comes. 22 below 31 below with thick suffocating ice fog. She burns a cord of wood in 3 weeks. Dunk Ferris comes by somewhat quietly to buy half a cord of wood for 50 cents. He doesn't say anything, but he looks at her double wall construction. Christmas passes quiet with salt pork beans and pickled beets. The Bible remains open with its charcoal equations and diagrams. Outside is 27 below. The room stays at 56. The stove maintains an advantage. The walls, already 1 January, arrives like a blow cold. And sudden a massive storm system rolls down from Canada with intent. The barometric pressure drops fast. Marta's ears pop. Dempster horses turn. Wall-eyed birds go silent in willows by noon. The sky is flat white like paper. A steady northwest wind leans against everything standing. Marta hauls water in every vessel for final preparation. She stacks firewood floor to ceiling along the east wall. She seals the door threshold with a rolled horsehair. Pat a second. Inner door creates a warm vestibule airlock. Hallie Dempster arrives mid-afternoon with 2 jars of pewed-up venison and a concerned expression warning of the storm. Marta answers yes to Hallie's concern, not as bravado, but as a calm technical assessment of her work. By nightfall, the temperature hits 17 Below by midnight, it is 29 below with roaring gusts at 3 in the morning. Sustained, furious pressure wakes her. A sound like standing beside a thundering waterfall, the outer wall pops once sharply with thermal stress, but the inner walls remain silent and warm inside is 48 degrees. She makes tea and listens to the storm try to break her built world before dawn. The tar paper on the north wall tears. Free, its low drumming sounding against the exposed boards. Crosses the wood, spends itself in the dead air gap, and is absorbed by the dense lime plaster inside. The thermometer reads 4 to 6 degrees outside. The world has plunged to 41 below zero. She stands in her vestibule, the cold crashing against her like a wall before she retreats inside. 8 to 7 degrees of difference across 8 inches of wood air, and lime plaster 200 yards north. Dunk Ferris is not sleeping in the gray first light. His cabin is 28 degrees, despite the stove burning at full draw. 40 pieces of wood, remaining 5 hours of fuel before he faces the woodpile in 41 below. Mrs. Ferris pulls both children into the bed. Under piles of blankets, her breath makes fog in the lamplight. As she watches, the north wall chinking is whistling thin and persistent. It is the sound of warmth leaving the cabin. Forever the inside walls are cold, radiating chill back into the room. You are warmer in outdoor air than beside 15-degree walls. Mrs. Ferris knows this in her body, pulling children closer. Westward, old Bjorn Nordstrom's situation is worse in every way. Bjorn's cabin was built in 1891. From green lumber dries and shrinks, splitting along the aging grain. By 1903, the north wall has gaps for a finger. These gaps let the wind through with almost no resistance. By 3 in the morning, Bjorn Nordstrom sits 6 inches from the stove heat. On his face, while the cold reclaims his back, he is wearing every piece of clothing he owns in the 18-degree room with wood. For only 2 more hours on his third trip to the woodpile, the Fontainebleau. Wind catches him, and he loses his footing on the ice-glazed step. His right hand strikes the ice at 40 below. His fingers move slowly, imprecisely, like a machine with a failing part. He gets inside and looks at his hand in the lamplight. The 2 middle fingers are the color of candle wax. Pete Dempster, following his emergency fence line, bursts into the 18-degree cabin to find the old man in his chair. Pete sees the empty woodpile and the old man's cloth-wrapped hand, then says one word. Come. The storm's second day is worse than its first. A white fury of January wind. The wind hits 50 miles per hour. Snow is driven into a solid, blinding wall. Marta opens the outer vestibule door to take her reading and sees only pure white. 4 to 3 below. She closes the door against the crushing sub-zero cold. Inside 49 degrees, she adds 2 pieces of pine to the steady fire. Pete helps Bjorn through both doors into the 51-degree room. Bjorn stands still. It is like stepping from a river onto summer ground. Bjorn puts his frostbitten hand against the plastered wall. Lord in heaven, he says, how is this room so warm? Pete looks at the double construction. It is real now. She built a wall inside the wall, dead air between them. Bjorn looks at Marta. His fingers are wrapped in cloth. I thought you were a fool, he says quietly. I know, says Marta, her voice as steady as her walls. I said so out loud. More than once. Bjorn confesses. I know, she says again. She pours him coffee. Drink. The storm holds for 3 days. Finally, the wind breaks 12 below on the 18th. Feels like a warm reprieve. Marta opens her door into a world rearranged by snow drifts above the fence rails. The road is completely gone. Tar paper torn free reveals the outer boards. Clean and whole, everything she built to stand is standing against the cold. Over 3 days, the cabin's interior never dropped below 4 to 4. She burned 6 to 3 pieces of pine. Less than half a cord. Dunk burned a cord and a half. His cabin hit 22. Marta walks to the Ferris fence line. Dunk comes out stiffly. He looks at her cabin's exposed double construction, where paper tore. He says nothing for a long time, watching her cabin. Then how warm did it stay? 4 to 4 on the cold night. 41 below outside. He does the arithmetic. His face changes. 8 to 5 degrees difference. He says, his voice full of wonder. Yes, Marta says simply. Her victory complete and quiet. The snow gleams. The air is 12 below and clear. I'd like to know how you built that. Dunk says the gap. Marta looks at him, remembering July, the Ukrainian woman building a wall inside a wall. She thinks of Lund's mockery and Bjorn's waxy, frostbitten fingers. Come by tomorrow. She says simply, I'll show you post-storm recovery. Begins. 3 families lose livestock, and the Haverson Barn collapses. The road to Elk Fork is closed for 6 days. By drifts, Marta's notebook records temperatures below zero. Until a February Chinook brings relief, she has wood to last through. March. Her planning held Anders Lund visits on a Saturday 3 outside 54. Inside, you built the wall twice, he says, touching the plaster 3 times, including plaster. The air gap is the key. Dead air it doesn't move, can't carry heat away. My grandfather knew this in Ukraine, where winters are serious. Lund is quiet. I said things. I was wrong, you were, she says, with the same plain, stoic voice. Lund buys half a cord of wood for 60 cents, and Marta records it with a careful hand. Spring comes slowly in March, and April a reluctant thaw of snow and mud. Mr. Hollowell makes his spring round, stopping at Marta's claim with a leather satchel. He comes inside, observing the double walls, the plaster, and the small stove. Hollowell's expression shifts as his assumptions are tested and found wanting. He reads her notebook, focusing on the record of 41 below zero. He does the arithmetic and his face changes, just as Ferris's did. Hollowell looks from the notebook to the walls. You designed this. My grandfather designed it. I built it, she answers stoically. Hollowell closes the notebook and hands it back to her. I think, says Mr. Hollowell, that you're going to be fine. She pays 3 months of the note. That afternoon, from her rebuilt savings, Marta watches Hollowell ride back toward Elk Fork through the April mud. She stands in the doorway, breathing air that smells of mud and snowmelt. Wisdom comes from books, failure, and understanding why your grandfather's work functioned. Her grandfather built in Poltava. He lived 50 years and died warm. The cold is not your enemy, he wrote in his careful old country hand. Put nothing between them, and the nothing becomes everything. She reads this on winter evenings by lamplight, with the stove ticking quietly outside. Montana temperatures do whatever they do while her walls hold. The double wall achieves what engineers are only beginning to quantify. 1 inch of dead air equals 3 inches of pine. Her 4-inch gap equals 12 inches of solid horsehair. Lime plaster adds thermal mass on the interior face. It absorbs stove heat and releases it slowly through night. The double ceiling prevents rising heat from escaping above gravel and clay. Floors hold steady warmth like a gift. She didn't invent this. Her grandfather didn't invent it. People of the steppes built thinking walls for centuries. They carried this knowledge in memory and their Bibles. What Marta did was refuse to forget it. Dunk Ferris rebuilds his north wall the following summer with Marta's help. They use the double wall method, the blocking, and the air gap. They mix lime plaster in a borrowed barrel, applying it hot. It isn't as smooth as Marta's, but it works just the same. Winter 19,041,905. Ferris burns half the wood he did before he shows Marta the spring figures. She accepts his apology. 3 more families retrofit their walls over the next 2 summers. Knowledge spreads quietly in farming country. 1 person, showing another. Bjorn Nordstrom builds a new cabin in 1905. Aged 71, his son from Billings calls it too much work. Bjorn looks at his frostbitten hand. 2 fingers still stiff. Build it twice. Bjorn says, knowing the price of cold. Perhaps you have been told that carried old country knowledge is outdated. Perhaps someone has stood at your fence and laughed at you. Perhaps the bank's man looked at your plans with a patient smile. Consider Marta Holovka's notebook, and the numbers recorded their dead air. 4 inches of nothing doing the work of wood. She figured this out by refusing to abandon something old. The cold is looking for a way and build a wall. It cannot find its way through, then build another wall behind that one. Put nothing between them, and the nothing becomes everything.